So regardless if the school pays for them or the state, it's still coming out of somebody's pocket. In open states, it's a matter of local choice, and that's how they do. Now, as you can imagine, in South Dakota, we have open policy that our districts pick their own textbooks. But I guarantee if we go to a national curriculum, that will go away. The feds will also pick our textbooks, and my guess is they won't pick them, they'll supply them, they'll send them, and it'll be all digitized. So you talk about that here under curriculum materials, open, what were they called? Open and state adoption policies, and what each of those. So I'm going to include that with 16 here, those two. And now we're going to talk about the district role of textbook selection and office curriculum specialists. So no matter how they do it, ultimately they have to supply textbooks for the schools. And again, it's huge in a place like Sioux Falls, it's so big. And I'm going to take you down here. Teacher participation in these committees. It's often done, and I got to do this a couple times, and it really was quite interesting. Committee examines available texts and material options and then recommends to the district superintendent, the school board, which material should be purchased. Teacher participation on these committees is important since they are the ones required to do this. So I'm going to say this is number 17. And you talk about teacher committee, teachers on a committee, school district people, committee selects it and recommends to the board. And then it's the board adopts it and those offered or selected. Then an office curriculum specialist. I want you to read this to talk about in this include about generalists, teacher on special assignment. You write a nice part about what this has to do with the office curriculum, district curriculum specialist. There could be a teacher on assignment, a TOASA, which is familiar with, but this whole thing here. And that's still, I'm going to call that part of 17. And now the local roles. Obviously, you bring the curriculum alive in the school. Be informed about the state standards and benchmarks, for the most part. Manage the curriculum. And that comes down to the ground level as you and me and the teachers, where we manage that curriculum. We make that. Here's a word that you can use. Here's a word that we'll use here is operationalize. We operationalize the curriculum, and that's what I want you to put here, and that's number 18. As teachers, we operationalize this curriculum. Teachers also must also use the materials and strategies that will help students learn, obviously, and how this happens in the middle and secondary schools, it's run by departments. Okay, and so you have a science department, a math department, an English department, performing arts, everything's runs through departments, and that helps you manage these materials and stuff. You always have a peer group. In the same way then down at the elementary, it's a grade level team. Or you may even have content-specific curriculum committees. But it always gives you a peer group to work with in operationalizing this curriculum. And so I would like that here also with number 18. Grade level teams, content teams, departments to operationalize this. That's selecting it. So evaluating curriculum, just a minute. I want to take you another spot now. I want to introduce you to this young man. His name is Ethan Young, and he's a high school student, and he just has some concerns about Common Core. And so I'm going to link this in. Let me take a look at this. I'll be right back. There, Ethan Young, and number 19 will be what is his main concern about Common Core. What is his main concern about Common Core? It's about a 7-minute video. Stop this, watch Ethan, come back and answer this, and then we'll talk about evaluating the curriculum. So let's get back to evaluating this curricula. How do we know if this curriculum is making a difference? Or so we have to have some kind of a systematic, organized way to evaluate the curriculum. Because we get together, or the feds, or the state, or whoever it is, sits down and comes up with this whole thing. How do we know if it's effective and it covers all the points unless there's some kind of organization, some kind of evaluation of it. So it has to be done carefully at all levels, like from teachers in the classrooms to school, district level, statewide. In addition, even internationally, you want to look at it to be able to compare these studies, or compare students. So curriculum evaluation primarily based occurs in the classroom, and you know that. It's hard to evaluate it except if it's down on the ground in your classroom. Until it's implemented, the student is assessed. Direct evidence of effectiveness cannot be obtained. And the first step is the teacher who implements the curriculum. Teacher informal assessment is how easy it is to teach and the effectiveness of textbooks, materials, and this. And again, this is what I say. So we're going to hand you a textbook. How do we know that's going to get the job done? And the amount of student interest and motivation are early indicators in this. And I would think that would have a lot to do with what school you're teaching in. But you can imagine this, that you would do that. You would look at the curriculum, you're teaching it. You would have a sense as a teacher how it's being received. Okay, so here this is highlighted. Another early indicator. So this here I had highlighted, early indicators of teacher assessment and the extent of student learning. Informal teacher assessments and formal testing done, they evaluate it. And then this whole story here in the middle is about how they do some of that evaluations and what they do with it. Okay, then the national curriculum, let me jump back over here. Teacher evaluate the curriculum and the implementation process. Assessment of student learning is an important indicator right away what's going on. Then researchers, curriculum evaluators analyze the classrooms. Nationally, this NAEP and state standardized tests look at it. Then we get to the districts. Districts and state. Well, first nationally, too important, this NAEP, National Assessment of Education, at most grade levels. And down here I want to tell you this again, NLCB. Do you remember what that stands for? Right, No Child Left Behind. Congress has mandated that all public school students be tested each year in grades 3 to 8. Again, you remember, the feds have no constitutional authority over schools, but with No Child Left Behind, they mandated that grades 3 through 8 are tested each year. Let the state pick the tests, but they must be tested. And now I assure you, the feds, if we keep Common Core, the feds will also start to tell you what tests to give. And then this data allow labeling of schools and districts, even ranking them in terms of student performance in this, and hence the scores they get. And then the district with state curriculums, school district states are focusing on student performance on the tests. No Child Left Behind mandated that test scores at each school be publicized, and we've talked about that before. I had you look it up, what the score was. In extreme situations, when the test scores are at the bottom year after year, such as Hartford, Connecticut, and Compton, Oakland, California, Lawrence, Massachusetts, Trent, New Jersey, the state may take over operation of the school district. And this has happened some places, and it says the results are mixed. Some places scores went up, but in others they remained low. Okay, so don't let that happen to your school where the feds come in or the state comes in and takes over and tries to run your school, because you can imagine how they run everything else. I can't imagine they can run a school, but they have had to do that where the schools consistently perform poorly. So ultimately, curriculum evaluation starts and ends at the local with you. Even though it's important to evaluate curriculum by making comparisons across districts, states, the bottom line is down at the bottom. Down at the ground level, classrooms, let's see. It also teachers who are on the front line of the curriculum because they personally deliver instruction to see the effectiveness. That's why it's practice of teachers and administrators regularly examining, and this is important. Some examples of the reflective practice of teachers can employ are this. And so I'm going to ask you to look at that right here. And this is number 20. Number 20, reflective. And you don't have to write all this, just bring some one-linings about this. It's what you can do to do reflective things there. Okay. Internationally, test scores used to compare students, of course. All right. So that's evaluating the curriculum. Now we're up to here. Down U, the instruction, the teacher side of the curriculum. Now let's talk about you. This is where the rubber meets the road. The teaching side of the curriculum, instruction. So far in this, as we go through this look at the plan instruction, a lot of it is above your pay grade. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to be involved, you're going to know, you're going to understand, you'll be the ones that they come to look at the effectiveness of curriculum, but ultimately this is where you are 100% in charge, and that is delivering, to teach this curriculum. So let me just take you, ultimately this is you. Begins with students need to learn these instructional objectives, and that's how do you create this learning now. Okay, teachers, you for the most part select strategies. This is a thing, especially in a bigger school. But you'll have school-wide things of how to better deliver this. What are the tools? What are your resources, and how are they changing? But this is you, that you deliver this. You create instructional objectives daily. What is it there's to learn today in my classroom? What are they to learn today? Okay. That's why I have this on each of these also. Here are the instructional objectives each week. When you're done with this lesson, you should understand these things. You should have a feel for each of these things. Each chapter, every week I had this for you, of what this is about. I tried to give you this also of how it was going to be laid out, so that you would have a preview of what learning was going to happen. All right? So first of all, what are these instructional objectives? And here's the thing with this, and I've given you this a number of times throughout the course, but there's some terminology here again that I want you to be familiar with, to have a working knowledge of it. Some of this will be gone, you'll drill down deeper in your more advanced classes, but at this level, and this course is really considered a survey level course, meaning at just a surface level, but it's the vocabulary that you need to take forward with you. And terms like objectives will be a common language for you as a teacher, and as a student teacher, and as a pre-service teacher. So throughout this whole course, giving you vocabulary that you'll want to work. And so I know a number of things here that won't register with you, but if the vocabulary, if you've heard it before. So instructional tools for creating the focus are called objectives. These are statements of expected learning, student learning for each lesson. The difference between objectives and standards is the size and scope of learning described. And so I would like you to put that right here. This is number 21, is the difference. Difference. Right here that I have highlighted. The difference between objectives and standards is the size and scope of learning described. Standards represent the broad learning outcomes that students are expected across several years. Benchmarks address parts of those standards, but they are quite broad and can describe learning accomplishments can take months. So instructional objectives are daily expectations, and that's what we ask you to do each day when you go in front of students or go in with students to teach, that you have objectives. What is it they're to learn today? It's a daily focus. And often we come to observe you as a student teacher. We'll want to know, what are your instructional objectives for that lesson, that day you're teaching? They have to be closely tied to the expectations and to standards and benchmarks, but you have to have something to... contrary to what some teachers practice, objectives for instruction should be known and understood by both the teacher and the students. And that's maybe a little bit of a change, but now you put that out there. You start out your lesson telling the students at the end of the class, this is what you need to know. And technology really kind of makes that simpler. You can run that up through technology or through their iPads or whatever your instructional tools you have. Okay, so this is important also. One of the important elements of writing objectives is having an understanding of their purpose. When teacher education candidates first write objectives, they frequently write them as input, which describes the teacher will do and what will happen in the lesson. The following objective is example. The student will be assigned to groups and they will read the chapter in the text. Such that an input objective is no longer acceptable because it fails to clarify what students need to do. So that's a change. I'm going to put that on. So input is what you're going to do, but what we're changing this to, writing objectives that are output statements, which describe what students are to learn. For example, as a result of this lesson, students will be able to compare the reasoning behind the economic and political arguments for and against withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. So inputs were what you're going to do. We want you to write outputs, and I would like you to do that. Here, this will be number 21. Or number 22, I guess we're at. Input, write something about input objectives and output objectives, and make sure you notate that this is the desirable one now, is output, what the student will do. And this is a little comparison here between inputs and outputs. And I'm going to ask you to bring that in. That is clip 12.2. And so this will be number 23, and it'll go right here. So what about these types of instructions? Types of instruction, objectives. And again, here's the terminology, objectives. And we'll look at a number of them here. Behavioral objectives, cognitive domain, and affective domain, and psychomotor domain. So each objective, each class, each instructional time, you would write really two separate objectives. And I want to jump back here to objectives again. What are the objectives? Short statements of expectation for that day, daily. What will the student learn? What can the student do, or what will they know when they're done? Not what you'll do, but the student will know. So that's the output of it. And should be known and understood by students before instruction. And so you're a little bit more organized. You have that ready to deliver. You have that ready to show students, because like you, maybe it's a little easier for me to learn, and for you to learn if you know ahead of time what it is I'm supposed to know at the end of this. Okay. So two types of objectives for each lesson: behavioral objectives and then learning objectives. And we're going to look at several different types of learning objectives. One for the cognitive, one for the affective, and one for the psychomotor. So let's first look at behavioral objectives. Focus on observable performance or task. That's what a behavioral objective is. And this is a term that has to be part of this, is observable. You have to be able to observe it, mark it, measure it, know about it. In fact, the proponents of behavioral objectives advocate that if learning cannot be described in terms of observable behaviors, then there's no way to tell if learning took place. Let me give you that again. If it can't be observed, the learning, that they've known something, if you can't document it, then we're not sure it took place. So from that, learning can be described in terms of behaviors. This means that behavior is the verb, action verb is key. So this can focus on behavior, can be perceived as like to observe, classify, name, list, or interpret. And so that's what I would like you to bring in here for this one, is those things. Observable or performance or task. And I would like you, this is number 24. Yes, number 24. And it comes from right here. I'll highlight it here for you. But this is what it means to be able to do it. To observe it, to classify it, to name or list or interpret it. And not words like appreciate and understand. It has to be more measurable than that. That would be your behavioral objective. Okay. Also with 24, I describe a little bit what is a task analysis. And it walks you through that here. What is a task analysis? So those are learning objectives. This approach to thinking about learning teaching has been criticized as too linear. Still, it's useful for teachers and students to understand what it's about. So that would be number 24. And then this cognitive domain. What is cognitive domain? Okay, this is here is in 1956. Okay, of course to you that is another world. My dad graduated high school in 54. Then went into the military. So in 56 was around the time my dad was in high school. My dad's an elderly man now. But this is when this came up, the taxonomy of educational objectives, the classification of educational goals handbook, cognitive domain. And the person of this was Ben Bloom, and hence Bloom's taxonomy. And if you haven't heard of this, it means you're just starting your educational program, because it's a big part of anything to do with teaching. And again, I sure hope that you come back to this in other courses in the future. But again, I want to introduce you and give you this vocabulary now. But it's Bloom's taxonomy. So what Bloom found out, or Bloom discovered and created, was that knowledge has different levels. It's not all the same. They identified 6 levels of learning and therefore educating objectives. It's been revised a few times, but ultimately this is what it was. To remember, to understand, and then to apply, and to analyze, and to evaluate, and then to create. And so, for example, this course here is at the bottom level, really, to remember, maybe to understand. For the most part, I have not asked you to apply, analyze, evaluate. I mean, a little of that, but for the most part, a survey level course like this, it's at this lower level. And this is one of the things that you'll ask yourself whenever you're creating these learning objectives. What is the level at which I want them to learn this? To just remember it, or on up here to, to a deeper understanding of it? And know this: it's you have to go through these in a learning process in order. That was Bloom's contention. And so you will decide what level is this being done. So it's Bloom's over here, a system of classifying knowledge learning outcomes in terms of complexity of mental activity required. So I have clipped this, and I'm going to ask you to, when you come in here, slide this down, and number 25 is clip. This is 12.3. And put it right there and slide these others down. So that's the first one. Learning objective for cognitive. Cognitive meaning what you know, what you think about. So then the next one is affective. Some would pronounce that affective. I say affective. Student learning, also important. And this person was Crothwell's affective domain. He had a different look at this. So the difference between affective and the cognitive is that this is about the students' attitudes, how they receive this. And you can see it's about the same time. The other one was 56, so just about 8 years later in 64. So it's kind of they're almost in educational terms parallel to each other at times. And Crothwell found that the students were more receptive to learning depending on their attitudes about it, how they felt about it. And so he felt, here were his levels, receiving it, in the description, how you respond, how you value the information, how you organize it, how you characterize it. So I have clipped this also, and so for Crothwell, I'm going to ask you to come in here and make this number 26, and of course push this down and talk about Crothwell here, and then bring in clip 12.4. Affective domain, and now psychomotor domain. Psychomotor domain really has to do with this physically doing something. Mind, body, to work together. So who's interested in this? Well, this is where the music and art, drama, industrial arts, and other vocational courses require them to perform. At the end of this, you have to physically do something. And so that's all you have to do here is talk about who is this, number 26. Or this is number 27, I'm sorry. That who's interested here is the music, art, drama, industrial arts, and other vocational courses are interested in psychomotor. So cognitive is how to think about things. Affective is how you value and your interest in it. And the last one is physically, if you have to do something because of the learning. Those are the objectives of your teaching. And every time you write, every time you approach it, that's the prism that you'll take through, that you'll go through. What is my cognitive part of it? What is the affective psychomotor, if it is? And ultimately, what is this observable performance they'll have to do? Objectives. Let's move on from the objectives to the teaching strategies. And so we have a number here that we'll go through, and I'm going to go quickly through these because I'm going to make this number 28. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this here is just a heading, really. Same with indirect instruction. You'll come up with something of how that relates to these. But these are the strategies now. And again, why I'm not going to really concentrate on these is because I just want to get with you now vocabulary for future learning. Here's some vocabulary. So when you hear about these in your instruction and your methods classes, that you have some vocabulary already on what those are. So let's take a quick look. So you understand the standard now, and you've written objectives, behavioral and learning objectives, and now how are you going to deliver it? And traditionally it was that stand and deliver model. You stood and delivered, or I stood and delivered, and people learned, and that's what learning looked like. And that's really the ultimate what direct instruction is known as, is that part of it. So it's involved you delivering and who's receiving it. And so what you can write about this is right here. It's a teaching approach in which the teacher clearly and succinctly provides precise information about a specific a topic, concept, or skill. I will call this traditional teaching, where you, the teacher, simply stand up, deliver, and provide information. And it's still considered an effective method. Reads right here, during the last 30 years, extensive research has been done on the behaviors and teacher and effective direct instruction. When the direct instruction is done well, with appropriate learning objectives, student learns two basic underlying assumptions. This are that the teacher knows the content, and its easiest way for students to learn it is the teacher directly communicate to them the information. So that's that's the assumption that this is built on. So here that the teacher controls the flow and the message and the time, and really is to maximize what we call here this active learning time, and you can put that in your note also. Active learning time, it's supposed to be at a greater level in direct instruction because the teacher takes the time to deliver the information. And then this debate is who's right, and it's a discussion about homework. And I'm going to put that on here. Again, I'm going to make a checkbox. This is, should we abolish homework, yes or no? And again, I'm going to ask you not to respond to this in discussion until you've read both sides of this. And again, in the the notes, I'm going to push this down below the direct instruction. I'm going to have a box. You're going to see a box like I showed you earlier that you'll check, indicating that you've done the discussion. And it's a reminder there. And don't check that off. I'm not going to put anything with it. You're just going to see a box like I showed you earlier for you to put a check mark in that you've done it. All right. And that'll be the extent of direct instruction. So now, let's look at these indirect things. I want to just flip back and show you a little bit what about this right here, the direct instruction. Should best, when learning objectives are clear and narrow, should be presented in a sequence, one step at a time, should check carefully for the understanding, practice corrective feedback, avoid negative criticism, view key points. And this is one where I would call it, this is the one where the teacher does all the work. Okay, so indirect instruction looks a little different. Teacher or students pose a problem or puzzle. The problem or puzzle is one of the amazing, and puzzle meaning something to figure out, is one that stimulates student interest and inquisitiveness, so that you can see where this is going a little bit inquiry learning. Teacher does not provide the answer or problem solution. The students initiate activities and investigate. Teacher serves as a guide. And that's the change. The teacher no longer is delivering. They're the guide or coach of the information. You no longer are the transmitter of it. You're the guide or the coach. And when students are stymied by all possible solutions that are given open consideration, and students articulate orally in writing or through presenting reasoning behind their answer solution. So now the indirect instruction is we shift some of the burden of learning and teaching to the students. They start to share. Direct instruction, the teacher carried it. Now it's a shared group. The teacher becomes just this guide or coach of learning, not the transmitter of the learning. So this is called direct instruction, and we have guided discovery, inquiry and problem-based learning. And again, here is some definitions here that may help you. But again, I will be very surprised if in your preparing to be a teacher, in your methods and stuff, that you don't come back and visit some of these. Inquiry, problem solving, problem-based learning. And then we go to the self-regulating strategies, and it looks a little bit the same. And what self-regulating strategies are for is to help train students how to regulate their own learning. So there's a cognitive learning strategy and a metacognitive and social effective strategies. So the cognitive learning strategies help them organize information mentally or physically and manipulate material or apply specific techniques or learning tasks, what they can do as far as related to the task. But metacognitive strategies are this: monitoring the thinking. It's a skill requires awareness, reflection, interaction. Those are some buzzwords. Reflect, interact, be aware of. And again, so that's part of your vocabulary. And all these, again, please read these all completely. Cognitive learning strategies, metacognitive, social effective, and that is how you're going to interact with others. And why this becomes important, because you may need to very directly teach these skills to students prior to them being able to be successful in indirect instruction. And hopefully your school, that they come into your grade, say for example you're an upper elementary teacher, that this won't be the first that they're introduced to these concepts. So social is to practice listening skills, restate what others have said, design probing questions, determine how the talents can complement others. That it's socially how they interact with it and with each other in the lesson. And then scaffolding, this is Vygotsky's 78, so it's not that far out of this time zone that we've been looking at, and it's really teaching about what a child can do alone versus what they can accomplish with somebody more experienced. What's the level of where they get their learning? And so that will take you down through here. All right. So organizing students to maximize their learning. And this is the different grouping here. Difference between a homogeneous group and a heterogeneous group. And you know how this is. Like a homogeneous group is that they're alike in terms of their abilities to learn or interest. And heterogeneous students are different. And then cooperative learning groups students in a way that provides specific roles. And I can remember when cooperative learning was first rolled out when I was first teaching, that you spent time, if you're going to have a group work together, that they didn't all do work on the same thing, that each one in the group had a very specific job on that. Typically in cooperative learning, these are some of the jobs. You would assign everybody a job, and so like it could be a group leader, a monitor, a resource manager. Let me see what else we have here. A recorder, and this is what you would do. And a reporter, you could have somebody that does the speaker, the writer, something, whatever those are, but everybody has a job. And that's one way to do kind of this heterogeneous versus homogeneous. Heterogeneous, if you read this here based on, you know, a cross grouping by different abilities and interests, that's one successful way to include them, is to go to a cooperative model where everybody has a assigned group. So those are the strategies through that. You don't have to do anything with this page. Use of technology to enhance instruction. I really think I'm just going to cut you loose on this and let you put this together yourself. This first whole part on working together is right here. Instructional features for effective integrating instruction. And it talks about students working in a group, achieve across variety, those types of things. And then we come down here, and each of these are headings. So what I'm going to do, where are we at here? We're on 29. I'm going to just ask you to do this, because there's lots to come on this. But each of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 things, and just a brief thing for each of those. And save that, and you can come out. And a lot of this you're familiar with. None of this will be new to you. And we'll go on to this about matching instruction here. So now, how do we match this to the learner's needs? And we look at we've had studies already about how different students are, how they learn differently. How do you do this? Well, the newest thing, and I call it that, it's been around a while, but it will be new to you, and that is this idea of differentiated instruction. Let me just take you a peek over here. It's matching instruction to the needs of students that can be based on these things: ability and prior experience, our learning styles, our conceptual misconceptions. And I'm going to make this number 30, where you simply put something in here for each of these, what they have to do with it. So this is regardless of their types. Every student respond differently than each other. So immediately show mastery outcome. Other students may exhibit misconceptions while other students may be confused. So what I want you to do, it gives you a scenario for each of these here. What do you do with the student that shows mastery? What do you do with the one that has misconceptions? And what do you do with the student confused? And it says here, for example, that the student that shows mastery, immediate mastery, could be provided inquiry lessons in an effort to follow them deeper in their understanding. Or the student has misconceptions, may need some direct instruction. And the student that's confused might benefit more from a totally different instructional method altogether. So I'd like you to put those three things in here about differentiating instruction. Then ability grouping. And there's some controversy on this, of course, is should they have different, be in different groups. But there's some information there. And then on these learning styles, and it could be a couple like sensory inputs could have something to do with it, or student processing information. I'll let you pick through that. And then this on a differentiator on conceptual misconceptions. And what you want to do is correct those as quickly as possible if they have a complete misconception about the information that you're providing. And then this goes into the strategies for students with English language learners and disabilities. And that's laid out pretty well here. Predictable classroom environment, nonverbal ways to demonstrate, content around themes, question them effectively, make sure it's understanding, A lot of this that can cooperate with each other, and this is a big one. It's easier said than done. And this will be effective for both the English language learners and the students with disabilities. And this takes you through all that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to just kind of jump over this here because you're going to revisit this a number of times. I'm not clipping that either. And then it's going to take us, this is still that. And here's the thing on collaborative classroom about your dispositions and stuff. And then working with special needs, and it's really going to interesting. It's going to take us through all the different disabilities here, like learning disabilities, hearing impairments, and I'm not going to have you work with this. I think you're going to revisit this other places, and for sake of time, this is on visual impairments, a very low incident disabilities, impairments. Here's how to work with physical impairments. Emotional difficulties might be, in my opinion, the most challenging to work with of all the different disabilities. All right. And then monitoring this progress through data-driven instruction. So here comes the third component of this instructional model, and that is this constant monitoring. We call it data-driven instruction, and that's your continually monitoring. Assessments can range from short quizzes and relate to specific learning outcomes in the day, or more complex than that. And so you're monitoring progress through the teaching instead of a summative thing, as we studied before. A summative evaluation is you don't evaluate until you're all done. But now a model more so is this constant, ongoing monitoring. We call it monitoring progress on the objectives, on the standards. So you don't spend a lot of time before you know if there's learning taking place. Helps you decide what you haven't taught well enough or what needs a different model to teach a different way. Helps you with differentiated instruction. So with that, there's a number of parts here. Effective teachers consistently rethink and redesign based on these assessments. So you have 6 steps to this collection process. Collect the data, reflect on the data, translate that data, redesign what do you have to do, assign feedback, and then your formative assessment on the instruction comes. And I won't have you do anything with that. I think you'll be fine with that. Let's talk about models for school reform, and I'm not quite sure how that fits in here, but let's take a look anyway. The big thing to know here is what this process looked like. Generally, it's multi-year things in certain subject areas. It seems like it's a common thing to do. We run for political offices. You're going to reform the schools, and everybody jumps on that bandwagon, and then we have lots of different models that come to form. But nonetheless, teachers will have new in-service. You'll all adhere to the same approach, same teaching strategies, and that it takes time to do that. And here, it takes you through a number of different ones. And I'm not going to have you do anything with these just because there's so much here. So that'll do it for Chapter 12.